And can I ask the audience that when you ask a question, please introduce yourself and also give the name of the organisation or publication that you represent. So, a scene setter. Let's go back, in fact, to 1804, if any of us can actually remember that far back, that is. And that was when the world's first ever railway journey ran for 9 miles from the ironworks at Penydarren to the Merthyr-Cardiff Canal in South Wales. Now, this groundbreaking event, the handiwork of Richard Trevithick, was one of the many hundreds of milestones that would pave the way for the modern railway industry. Now, Trevithick and those early pioneers could never have known how the railways would connect nations, revolutionise the travel industry and fuel global economic growth. Yet as trains come into their own as an alternative transport mode, railway operators are under increasing pressure to meet a growing demand and the expectations that go with it. That in turn means building competitive networks with developing technologies that are simultaneously safe, secure and seamless. Let's not forget that modern railway systems are heavily interconnected, capable of integrating huge volumes of data and digital technologies aiming to deliver high capacity and performance, all of which, of course, are a hacker's paradise. So, how can railways combat the dangers posed by them, the hackers, or the terrorists looking to stage a so-called spectacular using a passenger or freight train as their chosen instrument? Terrorism is one challenge, but what about the so-called everyday challenges that negatively impact the railway user experience and undermine safety? Even though rail is the safest mode of land transport, the 2011 findings of the European Union Agency for Railways, which were published in 2013, found that on average a derailment or collision is reported at least every second day in the EU. Excluding suicides, accidents to people caused by rolling stock in motion and level crossing incidents make up more than 3/4 of railway accidents. And it's in these accidents that around 1,200 people are killed and a similar number seriously injured each year. So, ladies and gentlemen, could you please hold those thoughts, because I'm going to introduce you to the members of our first panel, if you can come to the stage, and they are José Guillermo Zazayo Delano. So if you could please join us, and as he makes his way to us, let me explain who he is. He is President, General Manager and Executive Representative of Kansas City, Southern New Mexico. So thank you so much for joining us, if you could take your place. And also a special welcome to our second panellist, Alexander Volodkiewicz, who is the Senior Technical Inspector in Electrotechnical Areas of the Latvian Railways. Thank you so much for putting aside the time. Now, some of you who have the publicity will see that there should have been a third panellist joining our crew. That would have been Laurie MacDonald. She's the Assistant Deputy Minister, Safety and Security Group at Transport Canada. She is unable to join us, but does send her apologies. Now, today's discussion, or this part of the seminar, will focus on the rail freight industry, and each panellist will give a 3-minute presentation, 3 minutes. So can we start with the first of our panellists, José Guillermo Zazayo Delano. The floor is yours.
Thank you.
Yep, it's
okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon, and thank you for the invitation to participate on this panel. First of all, I would like to take just half of the 3 minutes to explain what am I doing here. I am the president of the U.S. company operating railroads, freight railroads in Mexico. The name of the company is Kansas City, Southern New Mexico. We operate over 4,300 kilometers of track all over Mexico, but we also operate in the United States. We face several challenges in the security matters and also in safety matters in our operation in Mexico. Just to mention a few of the security matters that we face in Mexico, I can speak about drug crossing the border, drugs, immigrants, thefts, vandalism, some angular closures in our tracks to derail the trains, organized crime, and some blockages to our tracks due to political situations. That puts in danger a great part of our operation. We invest a lot of money on that one, on the security matters, but we also invest a lot of money in the safety matters. Safety matters is important for us because we handle a lot of hazardous materials, a lot of gasoline all over our tracks, so we need to have safety measurements. We do have some actions in safety matters like firefighters training, hazardous materials incidents attention, permanent internal campaigns to reduce employee injuries, coordination with authorities for safety procedures, and also Red Cross and Railroads Association in order to participate with those organizations. Also, we establish safety routes, security weeks in our yards, and civil protection training to our employees and all of those handling our equipment or the goods that we transport over our tracks. I guess with that, I take already my 3 minutes, right? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. But before we part company, you actually held a workshop yesterday, I believe, and touched on some of the very themes, in fact, that we want to explore in a little bit more detail. But what were the general ideas that came out of that?
Yeah, I had some notes here that I would like to read to all of you. We discussed key issues affecting security in passenger and freight rail transportation, as well as issues related to the secure management of infrastructure. Regarding passengers' interface, a common theme throughout the presentations and discussion was in relation to coordination and cooperation in rail security. Also, significant discussions revolved around the use of passenger data, striking a balance between potential privacy concerns and ensuring security network. A number of good practices were also provided that could be shared through the tools provided by UNECE and UIC. Also, it was acknowledged that there is a need to be increased collaboration with law enforcement bodies within the countries, but also, within all the countries. Regarding freight rail, need for soft integration. In some cases, there are hardware links exist, but no regulatory and standards integration. Also, there is a national level security regulation, but no international. And in aviation sector, there is a single regulatory framework, but not for rail. Also, need to balance security needs in new equipment and regulations. Also, we gave some examples where about security and efficiency can be improved with cooperation between authorities and private sector, like the latest joint facility that Kansas City Southern built in Texas in the United States, where authorities from Mexico and the United States do a joint revision of the trains. And for security infrastructure, also, we talk about the railroad sector. Security has to be developed as element of quality on service, and regarding also supporting various activities like passengers, freight, and also infrastructure. Basically, that's a resume of all that we spoke yesterday.
Okay,
thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much. And Alexander, the floor is now yours, please.
Hello, everyone. My name is Alexander, and big honor to sit in front of you. And I want to start with the quotation from the Klaus Martin Schwab, the German engineer, best known as the founder of World Economic Forum. So the quotation sounds like, in the new world, it's not the big fish which eats a small fish, it's the fast fish which eats the slow fish. And I think that technology's evolution is going through over this idea. And in this context, I'm glad to say that in the last decade, a series of big modernization projects have been implemented in Latvia, positively affecting all areas of its activities. Train control system, signaling system, country-wide networking system was implemented. At the same time, plenty of small projects being carried out with the purpose to improve safety of every railway element. For example, we took a part in cross-industry hackathon. The hackathon IT terminology means 48 hours long brainstorming. So our hackathon lasts 5 weeks. And among all ideas, we started to work on the conception, CCTV, smart cameras, to with obstacle detection system to avoid accidents, mostly on level crossing for now. So, however, all the benefits have also led to the adoption of all the risks related to modern technologies. And here's the moment when we came to risk assessment challenges, and we have to know we are not allowed to deal with every threat same way because all the situation are specials. So we have to organize the clever use of financial and human resources. That's why we have to understand the threat and the factors that can violate the integrity of the system and its confidentiality and non-authorized access to it. So only when this task is done, we can deal or figure out what countermeasures we can implement. But one more word, if I may. I'm a little bit wondered that I never heard the idea. I want to represent to you, no matter how deep trust in the technology we have. So I gave you my professional engineer word that every system is built with a failure possibility. So we need to stay aware as humans. We need to stay well trained, educated in a lot of ways, just to be ready to act by ourselves in the situation, emergency situations. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alexander. You both represent different parts of the world, Latvia and Mexico, but you've both got identical challenges. That's the takeaway that I've got from what you've just said. And let's start with you, Jose. It's really the key point, and you touched on it, in fact, with the workshop. It is balancing these two elements. It is the private sector, okay, having to gather data, etc., but also the privacy as well. How do you get that balance, given that the security challenge that's out there for freight is huge?
That's a very difficult question. It's a very sophisticated question. I would say that talking about freight railroad, that is what we do in Mexico, or what my company does in Mexico. It's it's not that hard to handle privacy information because you do not handle passengers on your trains. You handle freight. But regarding the freight, we also have a confidentiality clause in our contracts with our customers that we are not supposed to give information of what is in our trains that our customers give to us to transport from one place to the other. But regarding authorities may have enough authority provided by law to request the information from us, and in that case, we are obligated to provide it. In the case, for example, of drug trafficking, we, in our company, we handle what we call the K9 unities. That means we have dogs specialized in drug detection that we use regardless of our customers if they know or not. If we find something there, then we call the authorities, and the authorities comes and take over that product. So we handle the information confidentiality-wise unless there is a law prevention that establishes the opposite to it.
Okay, so if the law intervenes, as in government law, then that's when the confidentiality is broken. But other than that, it is preserved. It
is preserved, and we are not allowed to publicize what we're doing. We generally publicize because people know that we, like for example, we transport a lot of new cars all over Mexico to the United States. They see it in our trains. Cars are not easy to hide. You have a big train cars with automobiles on it, so people know that we handle cars. For example, people know that we handle grain, but we do not publicize, and we are not allowed to do that.
And what about the Latvian experience? Is there an overlap there? Is there a lot there that resonates?
Oh, for now, no, for now, it's not exactly my sector, the security sector, but
in terms of the confidentiality, maintaining that relationship, and the central government only intervenes if there is a concern about what is being transported across the lines.
But I think that the Latvia is a part of EU, so we have the same vision of keeping privacy. And I don't know what to add to
Okay,
this.
no, but that's fair enough. But then let's go on to this other point as well. Again, it impacts on both of you because, look, we live in a changing world. And, you know, you have to keep abreast of it. You have to be ahead of it to a certain extent, which brings us into the area of cost, because there is an expectation that because of the volume of goods which are being shifted, it's got to be paid for somehow, the actual security cost. I mean, how does that break down? Yeah.
That's a very interesting point that we were discussing also yesterday. I didn't mention it here in the information I provided before. That is a very, very key factor, that you can invest as much in security, but to a certain point, because once you invest that much, that is affecting the competitiveness of your transportation costs. The rates are going to be increased, and the competitiveness of transportation by rail will be reduced. So that's a factor that we are always checking and reviewing. We can do it to a certain point, and we have to coordinate with authorities in order to also have authorities do their job, because we consider that we pay enough taxes, that authorities should cover most of the security. But also we understand that under certain circumstances, we also have to invest and do our part regarding security. So that's the balance that we find. What we have to do, what we have to invest, and what is up to the authorities to do and to provide.
Sure. So cooperation needed from the authorities in this as well, Alexander, because the actual technology, it is changing. It's very, very complicated. I know that it's an area which you feel very, very strongly about.
It's for me.
Yeah. Where do we start?
Yeah. Maybe I'm not a bit ready for the questions like this. Can you
But
repeat,
most of the data
please?
itself is actually digital,
yeah.
so there's a risk there, isn't there?
About what?
The digital data.
It's really hard for me. I'm mostly the technique guy, so maybe I know how to deal it technically, and maybe at some point.
Sure, but then let's look at this, because it does come back to this point that the technology is always evolving because the risk is constantly changing. So, from your perspective, how do you approach that?
It's a really hard question, just because I can't exactly say what the hardest challenge is, to find out the technical solution or to protect it. So maybe a century ago, all the technical stuff was working only on implementing something new, finding out. But now we have not to work in a parallel. You have to make something new. You have to make some progress, maybe, and in the same way, you have keep in mind how to protect it. Just because the threat, all the threats are in a winner position a little bit, just because they're acting without rules, they're acting without border. No, that's why maybe I can agree with almost colleague. That's the question to the authorities and a leadership. So maybe, as we heard yesterday, it's important.
In terms of those staying ahead and protecting the areas, do you find that perhaps, and this is a question to both of you, in approaching the security issue, sometimes you have to think like a hacker? We have an expression in England, poacher turned gamekeeper. Do you sometimes have to think like a hacker to actually understand or to get a sense of where the weaknesses are and how you can stay one step ahead? Yeah. Yeah, there we
Okay,
go.
ready. Yeah,
It's best to keep it on all the time.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, we have to. You have to think like the hacker, and we do that. We have a specialized area in our company, in our corporation, that is permanently watching for cyber attacks in all of our systems, because cyber attacks in our systems could harm not only the cyber security and the information that we have there, but could take they could get into the private information that we handle for security reasons. For example, they could get to know exactly what kind of product is traveling in what specific train, a certain time, a certain hour, in a specific region or area, and they could lead to an attack to that train. So that's very, for us, is a very high risk that we contemplate all the time. We spend a lot of resources and a lot of budget in preventing that from happening to our facility, our trains, and our assets.
And let's stay with this, Alexander, because I think recently you took part in the Latvian IT Cluster X Industry Hackathon. Take us through that.
Oh, I've been already told about it, no, a little bit. But I want to go back at previous question, if I may.
Sure.
For me, this kind of experience of defending the cyber defense, for me, is looks like most the chess play, but when the player is only one. So you have to do your best to do the move, then you have to do something better to make a counter move, and this game is kind of endless, just because we're making the possibilities, and those possibilities are working in both directions, so vice versa. Talking about the hackathon, it was just a start. It was a first hackathon in Latvia. As I know, we will have another one in autumn. So we just start more simple questions. So, but I really hope that in future we will be able to provide some solution, and not only for us, just for everybody else. Let's be optimistic.
All right, so, but this hackathon was a way of actually testing your systems to see that sense their robustness.
It's not working that way. All systems are certified with safety levels, so we are not testing them with the private sector. So it's not a good question from the confidential point of view, maybe. That's why we are working with them just only to find out some technical solution. But to defend our system, we have to do it by our own, just because more information about your system is leaked out, the more threats are coming in, so
Okay.
this is how it works.
All right, that's okay. That's a pretty comprehensive idea. But at this point as well, that I'd like to actually throw questions out, or throw the invitation out to the audience. Is there anybody out there who would actually like to put a question to either of our panellists? Feel free. If you do want to raise a question, there will be people with microphones to hand. Is there anybody who would like to broach a question? Or are you all very, very shy? Okay, well, two questions. Okay, there's a gentleman at the front and there's a gentleman there. In fact, shall we start with, well, you're one of our panellists, John, but if you could actually introduce yourself as well, and then I'll take a question from the gentleman behind you. But John, if you could introduce yourself to the audience and put your question.
Thank you. My name is John Lane. I'm Secretary General of Whirlpool, and Whirlpool is the European network of railway police forces. I have a question to José. You told us about the K9 dogs. So you as a private operator using specialized K9 dogs detecting drugs, but is it really your task? Because when you detect drugs, you have to give it to the authorities. So my question is, why, as you as an operator, are doing this kind of things?
Right, so why is a private company handling effectively policing duties in that sense, using the example of the K9 dogs? Jose.
Yeah, I think I have to give you a very wider answer than just that specific question, but I will get to that point. In Mexico, there's, I have to say it, there's not enough police force. There is not police, nor enough police assets. So we need to support the police also. And because it is in our own interest that we avoid handling drugs in our trains and other things. And we can not just depend on the police actions. So that's why we invest in this K9 union or group, and we invest in those dogs. We are continuously buying new dogs in order to have that opportunity also. We cannot enforce the law. Once we receive a notification of something, and we see the dogs are getting nervous there, what you know better than I do, the way it works, then we call the authorities and make them go to the specific train to review that specific also. Just to give you an idea, we have in Mexico 4,500 employees. 1,000 of those 4,000 is security employees that we pay as a company. That's why we always have the challenge on balancing how much we have to invest in security, how much really was our kind of obligation, and what is part of what the authorities cannot do and we need to do it. And that's one of the reasons why we have these K9 units in our network, not being a police force. I think that answers your question.
I think he's satisfied. Okay, there was a gentleman. Is there a second? You want a supplement question? I haven't forgotten you, sir. I haven't forgotten you.
Because that's clear. That's clear that you explained. But is it really the responsibility of a private operator to find drugs? That's what I mean. Because I can imagine that you take some measures to prevent stealing from cars or that kind of things. But drugs, I think it's really specific police task. So is it really your responsibility?
I think we have a different point of view here because the way the law works in Mexico, I do not know what is in every container. If you are my customer, I go to your facility, I pick up the container, and you give me a declaration on what is in there. I have no authority to review or to go and check that really what you said it is in there, really it's in there and it's not a different thing. So that's a police matter, it's not our matter. That's why we have to do it this way. I know it looks kind of weird that we, not being an authority, not being a police department, are kind of working as a police with these units. But we have to do it, but we also, like I mentioned, I already have 1,000 people dedicated to security. 1,000 is a lot of people in a private company dedicated to security. Security is not our business, but we have to complement our business with security.
So the two run hand in hand. You've been very patient, the gentleman over there. Could you introduce yourself and also give the name of the organisation or publication you represent?
Good afternoon.
Is your microphone switched on?
Now it is, I hope.
Yeah, we can hear you, that's great.
Good afternoon. Waiting was not a problem, lunch is excellent. Good afternoon, my name is Menno Menist, Panthea, the Netherlands. We are heavily involved in the European transport corridors, including the North Sea Baltic corridor, which, well, the Rail Baltica is a big investment program. What is concerning me with security, currently in Europe it's very difficult to predict the expected time of arrival for freight trains, which is in a way not good for the customers, not good for efficiency. Am I naive to expect that because of security requirements there will be more data and that can increase the reliability of the expected time of arrival? So is there a positive side to the negative element of security investments?
Okay, interesting question. So Alexander, would you like to handle that?
As I understand, this was my question. The
Yep,
Rail
sure,
Baltica
sure, absolutely.
is too far from...
There may be implications for Mexico, but please go for it.
Yeah, I will try. I will try to answer you. So maybe mostly the technical solution. So, or as I see it, just because it's not really my field, as I said before. But as I see it, that new data transmitting system in Rail Baltica will be made with the modern technologies, and as I see it, as a closed network, just operating in there. So maybe there will be a couple of points when we will be connected to other data networking. So I really hope that those points will be protected enough, and I don't have a doubt that it will be, just because but there's one question related to safety and security matter. So we have to try to make security, IT security topics more, I don't know, more modern for the teenagers, just because when now we are choosing to be theft or to be an authority, the choice is clear for me. I'm young, I wanted to protest, so I choose the wrong side. And I think that we have to work to get some interest from the new generations, the new minds. Just so I want them just to think that it's, can I say in teenage language, that it's more cool to work for the authority and to defend, more cool than to be a threat.
So for you, the way to do that is education, actually, saying, look, it's actually far more exciting being involved in the security side rather than trying to break it down and causing disruption, changing the mindset.
So maybe we can try, we can get something, no like now, I don't know, kind of movies or books, for example, when the thieves are the heroes. So we have to try to make it vice versa. Sometimes, like in old times, when the knights and the kings were the good ones, and everybody wanted to be a good hero.
Sure. Okay.
But now the time changed. But I really hope that we will come back.
Okay then. I mean, it was a specific European question, but I mean, look, it is this idea that you can have lots of security, lots of technology, you keep your cargo safe, but from the customer side of things, there's the expectation of delivery. It has the potential to slow it down. I mean, what's the Mexican experience?
I don't think I understood very well
the question which the gentleman raised, he raised it in relation to the European experience. I think it was the idea that you can have all this security and technology, but it's the delivery time that, on the one hand, it's great, keeps it safe, but it slows things down, and that incurs a cost. So
again, everything can be solved depending how much you want to invest, how much rates you want to pay, but also depends also in how efficient you are to implement. We try to implement this in our company in a fast, quick, and not expensive way. So we can deliver a safe, secure service with not a high rate. That is something that we try to do every day, and we try to improve every day. It's not easy. There is not always enough budget, and there are also sometimes faults in our own side that we do not implement well. But that's what we work for, because our customers are always pushing back to us, say, hey, I want a better service and I want a lower cost. And that's our challenge every day.
Right, so better service and a lower cost. That is a bit of a challenge, really, isn't it?
That's a big challenge. Yeah.
But I mean, do you feel reassured by this, the gentleman who asked the question? You don't feel reassured at all? No? Sorry?
No, what I was hoping was only that security results in transparency. Transparency could possibly result in more efficiency, so better, in the end, better service to the customers.
But it still comes back to cost, though, the cost.
Yes, but security is already a necessity, whether
Sure.
you like it or not. So I'm looking for ways to also use the positive side of the negative reasons.
So using the positive side of the negative reasons. It's live, your mic.
Yeah.
It's working.
There is always a challenge, and again, there is always the need to use technology, to to use efficiency, to get to efficiency in not only in security, in operations, in many other parts of, but at least what what we do. We try to get the best technology, implemented the better way. Again, not to impact this on the rates, but also we need to work and push with the authorities, because don't forget, at least in our side and in our country, we feel we are paying taxes, and including in those taxes is a responsibility from the government and the authorities to provide certain kind of security. And again, we understand that we have a role to play on that. And that's what we do, and that's what we try to do every day, to cover our part of the security with the lowest price, with the better technology, to make sure for our customers that we deliver safe, secure their products and on time at a reasonable rate.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to put a question to the panel at all? Further questions? Okay. Can I just move it on? Again, this is probably more your area, Jose. It's the delivery of chemical materials, because again, that does concern a lot of people, particularly as you've got some of the routes which are going through populated areas. Yeah. I mean, okay, some people say, well, it's quite simple, but just reroute the freight. But then that's incredibly expensive as well. I mean, how do you address that? Because again, if you're carrying chemicals, they're very vulnerable when they're traveling through very exposed areas.
We work, of course, we always provide training to our employees on what to do in the case of an emergency, an incident. We work with the authorities and with the firefighters and the proper authorities in different regions, because our trains travels thousands of kilometers with those kind of products. And we always try to use the international measurements and certifications for our tank cars and everything in order to avoid any kind of an incident. It's not easy, there's always a risk, and we know that, but it is more risky to have those kind of products on the highways. So that's why they are being used, they are being moved by trains that are more safe, more secure to move, but still something could and can happen. We try to avoid that from happening. Thanks, we have been very lucky, and we think our systems and our process are working, because we haven't had a big accident as of today.
Okay. Do you think, though, that, and again, it's a question to both of you, really, whenever you, and I've certainly found this just from chairing various transport groups, etc., that there is this real worry that perhaps there's a slight disconnect between your experience as people who are responsible for running the railways, handling the technology, etc., between those dangers, what needs to be done, and politics. How much of an intrusion is politics in meeting those security needs? Because what you do is it's important not just to the freight, it's important to the economy. So is there often a conflict zone there between you both? I mean, who would like to tackle that first?
I can give you one comment and leave it for
okay.
him, or does what you want?
Whoever, don't fight about it though.
Okay, very important part of what we do, we are a concession in Mexico. That means we do not own the tracks. The tracks are owned by the government, but we run over these tracks because of this concession. So we are a regulated industry. We work very close with the authorities in order to comply with investments, with security measurements, with safety measurements. But we also work with all of them in a daily basis to make sure that we are doing the right thing, and if something goes wrong, we all work together to solve it. That's what I could tell you now.
Alexander.
Simple question, just because the Latvian Railway, we are having all the base and technical and human resources for almost every situation. Everything is clear to read and to understand. For example, at the threats like at chemical or similar. So we have special forces, kind of emergency forces, 24/7. So, and I don't know, every railway regulation is coming from the town side, and no, for now, I don't see a big. I'm not so worried about this, just because the chain is clear and it's working. So maybe there will be some I don't know, implementation to make this process more simple. But for now, I see how it works, and I'm sleeping well knowing it. So.
I'm glad to know you're sleeping well. Again, I'd like to throw this out to the audience. Are there any questions that you would like to put to our panel? Again, we will be changing the panel, doing a rotation, because we're looking at freight, we will be looking at the passenger side of things. So before we do that change, yes, gentleman over here. Could you introduce yourself and the organisation that you represent, please?
Yes, my name is Darren Williams, and I represent the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. I'm a health and safety advisor in EBRD, and one of the things that I'm involved in is obviously carrying out due diligence of rail projects. Now, this is operators, this is obviously individuals who are actually involved in the infrastructure. And this question goes out to Jose, really. Obviously, the carriage of hazardous materials, and I can go back a few years where we actually were informed of a serious incident where one of our clients, a freight train derailed, and it caused a huge explosion, had a massive impact to the local communities, because this actually happened, unfortunately, close to a village. How confident do you feel that the tracks are being maintained appropriately, and what measures do you do to make sure that you are operating on tracks that are safe and secure? Because it's something, I guess, I'm conscious that regardless if it's your fault, it's a big reputational risk for you.
So track maintenance and track maintenance, basically.
Yeah, track maintenance is a very important issue for us. We have equipment, and we have people working every day in all of our tracks in order to avoid having that kind of incidents or accidents in our tracks. Sometimes it happens even though we have reviewed it, and we have faced some issues on that. But we invest every year a lot of money just by reviewing. We have the state-of-the-art equipment to review. We X-ray all the tracks all the time to avoid any breakage of any track that could cause a derailment on the crossing of the trains. And we are also changing most of the time rail. We are also changing the sleepers or ties. We are also changing anything that we see is need of be replaced. That is a huge cost for us. It's a huge investment, but it's worth it because our business depends on that. So that's very important, and we do take a lot of attention to it.
Okay, thank you. Does that reassure you at all, the gentleman who asked the question? Yes, you're reassured. That's great. Does anybody else have another question to put to our panel before we actually do the switch over? Is there any final question you'd like to put to our two guests? No? In which case, what I would say to you is, Jose Guillermo Zazayo Delano, thank you so much for joining us with your expertise, and also Alexander Vodkevich, Security Directorate at Latvian Railway. Thank you both. And could I call to the stage members of our second panel, please? They're on their way, which is excellent. Thank you very much. Excellent. Please be seated, and I will introduce you to them, starting from left to right. Norio Hisuishi, who is Global Sales Director, Security Systems Business Division of Panasonic Corporation. Thank you so much for giving us your time. John Lane, who's the Secretary General of Railpol, that's the European network of railway police forces, actually asked your fellow panellists, interrogated them. That's probably the kindest way of putting it. Very good questions, though. And also Professor Gerd Neubeck, who is the representative of the Board for European and International Security Issues at the German railway group Deutsche Bahn. Thank you so much for joining us. Okay, so we've gone from freight to passenger rail. And Gerd, I'd like to start with you first, in fact, because in my scene setter, I talked about so-called everyday risks. And when we're talking about these everyday risks, we're talking about the sort of the nuisances to travellers, vandalism, antisocial behaviour, that sort of thing, which there is a sense that somehow it is treated separately from cyber and other forms of danger to the railways. But there is a connection between the two. You shouldn't, it's dangerous to separate them. That's what I'm getting at. Is that how you feel? They shouldn't be treated separately. They should be treated together.
Yes.
There's a microphone. There's a microphone there.
Yes, of course. There is a risk in different and separated responsibilities for these issues, but you can solve it that way. But my company decided to separate the responsibility because the business we are running is so complex and the issues are so big, so it would be not good to have it in one hand. But knowing the risk with this solution, we have, of course, processes for exchange of information, of collaboration, and we try to diminish this risk as much as possible.
Okay then. I'd also like to move on to John Line, because I know there are a number of issues which you feel very strongly about, which you'd like to share with us, so please.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, microphone. Is the microphone on? Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, that's great.
Juliette, yes. Yeah, it's working, thank you. Yeah, well, I'd like to start with the two definitions of safety and security. I always look a little bit strange when there's a dividing. I think it's more dividing in language and not so much in really doing the work on the rail and on the tracks. So safety is more about comfort, about protecting, and security, and that's our main task, is more fighting criminality. And I think one of the items for this session was, can security and safety be seamless together? I think they can. Of course, there is a difference. I always give the example of an emergency door. From a safety part, it has to be open when you want to evacuate the station, but from security part, it has to be closed. Well, there are solutions to do that. A second item is important for us, especially from Whirlpool, is the sharing of responsibilities. We always see an operator, it's a public task, but it's also a private task. It's a private company who want to make money, like a shop. So you have to have your own responsibilities as an operator also. Take your infrastructure measures, have your own security, train your staff, hire security forces. And when you have done all that, and there are still problems, then you can go to police. And there's also a gray area where we can work together. And I think that gray area is very interesting. And that gray area is worthwhile to look into if we can work more together.
Okay, thank you. So definitions there of safety and security. And can I now move over to Norio Hitsuishi from Panasonic, looking at the technical side of things. So please, over to you for 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm quite honored to be here and as a representative of security camera manufacturers and related solution provider. We have been supporting railway industry traditionally to capture video image in the station or in the train or along the railway, and station staff can monitor the situation. But requirement has been moving more to analytics side, detecting something wrong and send signal alert and to prevent such kind of situation would happen. So, for example, we have just introduced AI-based face recognition system to detect blacklisted people. If such person comes to the station, we can detect and send signal alert. So I think this kind of requirement is a global tendency in the railway industry.
Okay, thank you very much. That's really a sense of where our guests are coming from. But I'd like to start with a general question as well, because look, in my scene setter, I did actually go through some railway statistics. But from your knowledge of the railways generally, do you feel that rail has a good enough safety record? And I'd like to put that question first to you, Gerd.
Well, I'm responsible for security, and this is my main task, but at my point of view, we have a good record. Of course, we have accidents. You can read it actually in the newspapers or wherever. And as long as we have such accidents and mistakes, we have to improve, of course, our records. And if you look at the reasons, I don't know the exact figures, but a lot of reasons for such accidents, safety accidents, are the people, are based on human mistakes and failure. So it is really difficult to give there a clear and only one answer.
Okay, and from your point of view, John, do you feel that rail has that good enough record, given the definition you've given us of safety and security, or is there work for improvement? How much improvement, if needs be?
Yeah, I think the record is enough. In my experience, I think also that the railways are doing a lot of things to give prevention on schools, for instance. And that's also one thing that we can work together, because also police, together with railways, especially when you have a train driver who has an accident, it's very good experience to go together to schools and to talk about it on one side from the operator's part and on the other side from the police part. But there's still a lot of work to be done, that's for sure.
Indeed, and I could see you, Norio, nodding your head quite vigorously there, but I would get the impression that technology can only do so much, and that perhaps one of the pressures that you face is an excess of expectation. Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
Yeah, please do elaborate on the point, sir, please.
Okay, so I think compared to airplane, beauty of train is kind of convenience. So inspection is not required too much before getting on board. But under the pressure to prevent terror attack, maybe more and more detection would be required from technical point of view. Yeah.
Okay then. I mean, look, let's broaden things out a little bit, because, you know, we can talk about how we can improve our railways, etc. But at the same time, we shouldn't actually overlook the importance of infrastructure as well. I mean, how much does the infrastructure play into that security dynamic? Who'd like to tackle that question? Who'd like to go for it? Would you like to try that, Norio? Is the question the issue of security and the infrastructure? Because yes, you can do so much, but we shouldn't forget the importance of the outer infrastructure as well.
Yes.
That complements what you do.
Yeah, for example, to monitor if railway itself is well maintained, I think most of inspection is done by human eyes, but I think it's also time consuming. So maybe video analytics could be utilized more. So
more video technology.
Yeah, so if you capture good condition in advance, then compare with actual images, then we can analyze those images and send kind of signals. For example, this area may be needed to maintain more, something like that.
Sure, and that also comes as well, I would imagine, from a recognition of just how complex, Gerd, the railway system is, and the fact that more people are using it, especially as they're under pressure, if you like, to ditch one form of transport, notably cars, and find the greener, safer alternatives like the trains. Gerd.
First, I want to talk about an error. We want to have here. First statement is the railway sector and the railway premises are safe, in total safe, and the crime rate concerning the whole sector is much more lower than the other, and the whole open space we have in our countries. So we are discussing about a crime rate in a very, very low level, but of course any incident there is one too much. And so this is the challenge for us to struggle against this, to combat crime. And of course, we are sometimes compared with the aviation sector. This is not fair, because in the aviation sector, everything is closed. Even the freight is checked, probably. And the passengers are totally checked. Our system is more and more open. You've talked about the infrastructure. Of course, you can do checks of people entering a station, a big station. But theoretically, if you look at the big stations in Europe, the main station in Hamburg, nearly 600,000 people entering the station a day. How will you really check anybody in an airport style? This is impossible. And the infrastructure, meaning tracks, are open. Sometimes people are asking, why do you not build up fences? Ridiculous. 35,000 kilometers of track only in Germany. Ridiculous. And nobody is talking about the highways. Nobody is talking about building up fences on highways. So this is not fair to compare, but this shows that the railway sector is working concerning security under very, very different circumstances.
I'd like to stay with this idea of the comparisons, because there are some transport experts who feel that perhaps one sector can learn from the other. There has to be an overlap. Well, Geert's pretty much poured cold water on that, but from the policing perspective, John, is it actually unhelpful when people say, well, okay, then why can't you actually apply some of the lessons learned from one sector to the railways?
We are working very close with Airpol. Airpol, that's a network of air police. And what we see, there are not so many things that we can take one-on-one from air to rail, to road, to rail. I think Geert already mentioned some examples. I'd like to add something more. I know at the airports they have a very good awareness program. And during our meetings, also with the politician in Brussels, they say, why don't you use their system? We have our own system. It's similar, but people on an airport behave different than people on a train, on a station. So you have to have another system. Also, one of the ideas was to have train marshals.
Similar to the air marshals?
Yes. So we make a small calculation in 1 hour. You need about 1 million police officers, something like that. Because of all the trains and all the special cabins, it's not like an airport that you have one thing. So yes, the train it's an open system, like Geert told us, and it's make it very difficult to protect that. When an airplane is in the air, it's safe, but when there's a train leaving the station, it's really not safe. Yeah, it's safe, but not secure against terrorist attacks. And of course, like we mentioned in the start. We really focus a lot on terrorist attacks, but we must not forget also antisocial behavior and all the other incidents, because terrorist attack is just a minor thing. It's a great impact, but
it's the infrequency of a terrorist attack.
Correct, yes, yes. On the other hand, we as police, we are a little bit worried this year because of the Inspire magazine from ES. It was on the first time they pointed out to the railway sector. So we don't want to get into panic, because police officers don't get into panic, but we are a little bit worried now. Yeah.
Let's go to Norio, because when we talk about the technology, or the perception is that it can only really be effective in terms of preventing a terrorist attack. But what about things like antisocial behaviour or other things which are a nuisance to the railways? How can technology actually tackle that?
Yes. Yeah, so it's very difficult to monitor all the railway network because huge range we have to monitor. So if a railway company decide to increase number of cameras, security camera, it's good for us. But,
More business.
Yeah, but actually it never happened. So how to install security camera on most proper way is a kind of solution. And I think it's very difficult for manufacturer side to answer to this kind of question. But maybe based on our video record, we can analyze what happened among passengers, and maybe we can get kind of tendency from such kind of behavior from video image. Then we can also utilize for analytics side.
Okay then, so really the video recorder filming some of the behaviour, but you can actually draw psychological conclusions from it. That in turn can shape policies going forward. Okay, I mean I want to pick up something which you talked about, John, about the policing side of things, because is there a risk from your perspective that there are certain things which specialist rail police officers should be handling, but perhaps they're being swallowed up in general policing, so that in itself undermines what you're trying to do, because that specialist area is being taken over by officers that perhaps are not familiar with it, or they don't have the sort of knowledge with it that perhaps they ought to?
Yeah, what I see in European police, and then especially railway police, for some 10, 15, 20 years ago, a lot of countries had specialized police, specialized railway police, who knows about the system, who speak the special language of the railway staff, but also know the technical, the safety aspects. And what I see lately, that more and more countries are having the police task on the railways on national police service, so on federal police or national police. There are only just a few countries left who have specialized police. And you can see that specialized police is much more effective in fighting crime on railways than the other police. Because the priorities is not made by the police. Priorities is made by the politicians. And we have to follow the politicians. So
it's all their fault.
Right.
But I mean, from your perspective, Gerd, I mean, we know what you said. I mean, the concerns that you have about antisocial behaviour, also this recognition that there has to be, that rail travel is very complex. I mean, is this something that you're seeing, that it's not quite the demise of the specialist officer, but the sense that they are in danger of becoming an extinct species because they're being swallowed up by general policing tactics?
I can underline what John said. This is my opinion as well. And this continues. If you look at the railway companies, this is one part of our system, that we have a lot of different railway companies running trains in Europe. For example, in Germany, I don't know the exact figure, it's increasing day by day. I read last year we had around about more than 450 different companies running trains in Germany. Of course, my company, the biggest one. And of course, concerning security, we have no common standards. We have no common rules. This is quite opposite to safety. In safety, you have standards for whatever you want. You have certificated systems. In security, everybody understands something different. And looking at the problems the different companies have, they have different solutions. From these 450 or more companies in Germany, only a few have own security stuff. my company has around about 2,700 to 3,000 people, staff, security staff. Most of the smaller companies don't have any security staff in their trains. So this makes the difference, and of course this is very, very suitable for people with unsocial behavior, for criminals and others, of course.
Right, so basically the irony is that it's actually playing into the hands of people who are trying to undermine the system. The two things really, the lack of the specialist officers, that they are a dwindling breed, and also the complexity of the railway systems.
Of course, I mentioned the open system, the intermodal system. It's easy, it's customer friendly to travel, to switch from one to the other. And this is the sense of this system. This is our advantage, but as well, it could be a disadvantage at the same time.
It's a nightmare for policing it as well, John, because we talk about seamlessness and integrating these different modal systems, perhaps with trains at the heart of it. And where do you start? At which point of the journey?
Well, that's my question also, Juliette. Where do you start? Yeah, I think. Like Gert said, you see more and more private operators coming on the tracks. It's also the system, how it's working. And actually, from police side, you see that we have the best cooperation with the largest company. For instance, in Germany with Deutsche Bahn, in Holland with Dutch Railways. So the big companies who are from old school, actually governmental controlled companies, they are the closest to the police. And when you see all the new small operators, well, actually we just handle it as an incident in a shop or an incident in whatever, just like a normal incident. But it's not, of course, it's not.
Sure. And it's how it has the potential to grow as well and feed
Correct.
into other things.
And so it's so difficult because, like I said, we are very open for a good communication with railway operators. But with so many operators, it's so difficult to find a good balance in our communication.
Sure. And let's stay with the idea of these multiple operators, because, Norio, there is the argument that perhaps where you have had this fracturing of the picture, perhaps companies which operated independently, they're now working together, etc. There is the argument, look, it's a very good economic case, but how does that impact on you? Because if you obviously have an idea of what's going on, and if you've got companies which are perhaps cutting down their operations and you're saying to them, well, hang on a minute, you can't do that because, look, this is the bigger security picture. How can you actually get it through to them that you can't cost cut on security?
Technically, it's possible to share the video data among each railway or among each country. However, as you said, data security is one of the biggest concerns. So we have some idea to encrypt video data itself. And also compression of data, video data size is also important to share the data because if data is huge, it takes too much time to send by email or by transaction. And also, I also touch on installation of security camera is now moving not only from fixed installation, like on the wall or on the ceiling, but also police officer himself, herself, started to wear on the shoulder or chest. So it's much easier to capture such kind of situation, and including conversation, voice data. It has been already very popular in the United States.
Right.
And I think it's also happening in Europe as well.
So in that sense, that certainly addresses the cost issue as well, because if you're wearing the technology, then you're not having to install lots of cameras and things like that.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Okay, then. So at this point, I'd like to open things up to our audience. I mean, look, the guys have had plenty to say there. There's quite a lot more, I'm sure, that you'd like to add to the discussion. Is there anybody who'd like to put a question to any of our panellists? Please don't be shy. Put your hand up and a microphone will find its way to you. Aha, there's a bit of a competition here because we've got two people sitting side by side. Ladies first, ladies first, ladies first, and then the gentleman sitting next to you. So a microphone is making its way to you. If you could introduce yourself yourself and also the organisation or publication that you represent. And please give your question to our panel.
Okay, I'm Cristina Fiorentino, representing Corpofer, which is the Association of Security Managers and some police forces, railway police forces in Europe. So we have normally contacts with Railpol, since they're the Association of
All right, so
Railway
you
Police
guys
Forces.
know each other, basically.
Of course, we know. So, well, my question is, in the market, the railway market, the question is for John Lynn. In the market, the railway market with such a deregulation, which is such a great number of competitors, as you said, would you suggest any specific measure, any specific official and regulamental way for communicating with operators in terms of security? Because you said it's a problem. But I would like to have your point of view. How would you, in a dream world, solve this problem?
Okay, so we live in for a few moments, we're going to live in a dream world. So how are you going to solve this issue of communicating with the operators over this security?
Yes, we as police, we are always limited by regulations and legislation. And she knows that more than everybody else. Of course, we are open for communication, and I think it's also important. But due to the legislation, some police information can only be shared by police organizations. It doesn't mean that we can do more, because we can do more. What we promote in Railpol to our members is find your partner, your train operator partner in your country, and try to communicate with them, to build up your network and start to trust each other. Because I think if you trust each other, communication will be so much easier and quicker to do. So, two things. First, there's the legislation, and it's somebody else who has to do that. But from police side, I think we can make a huge step to communicate more with our partners, our stakeholders in the railway environment.
Right, in the ideal world, if such a thing exists, communicating more with the other stakeholders. Would our panellists like to add to that, any of the other members, in terms of responding to the question? Because if not, then we can bring in the gentleman. Would you like to add anything to that, Gerd? Or please, feel free. Yes, and the same to you, Norio. Please, feel free.
Of course, we need the information by the state's authorities, secret services, police forces, to prevent crime, which is not our first duty as private company, to prevent crime. Our duty is to let the people feel safe, secure, and let them travel safe and secure, but not preventing crime in that way. But of course, we are supporting the police forces in this task. And I was talking about nearly 3,000 staff members of our private security company. If you look at the mass of the traffic of DB in Germany, it's not too much, but so we have to steer them in a smart way, and we're doing that at the points where we need them, and at the time we need them, day or night. So we need this information. Of course, we are looking at the incidents as well. We have quite good statistics, so we have material and basics to steer, but better with the figures of the police, and there we are cooperating a lot. And I underline that. We have in Germany, for example, this is a best practice, I think, than more than 15 years now, a public-private partnership with the federal police, which is responsible for the railway security in Germany. And we are sitting in our situation center desk by desk with the police officers. So an information the police has and necessary for our work, we have at the same moment. And this is what we need. but we don't have these situations, you know that, all over Europe. But this could be something to be improved.
Okay, then. Before we go to the gentleman who was also wanted to ask a question, one thing I wanted to pick up on, John, is that, look, there is sharing of information, but obviously there are limits to how much you can share. But the regulations which determine that, how often are they reviewed so that you can perhaps share a little bit more? Because clearly there is that willingness, but there is an element of constraint.
The big problem is, I'm talking about the information we get from intelligence. And that's very precarious, because in intelligence you work with people who are on deep cover inside criminal organizations or terrorist organizations. And that's very difficult to share. I know when there is a specific threat, so it's more concrete. A lot of national coordination center of counterterrorism in the countries are sharing that information directly with the railways, because railways are noticed as critical infrastructure. So on that way there is, but a lot of things can be shared, also not within police themselves.
So some things can be shared within the police, but again, presumably there are restrictions, be it internal or external, that determine how much you can share with each other.
Correct, yes. And of course, like Gadget data can be shared, because that's just data.
But then how often are the regulations, if you like, reviewed? Because we're living in a different world to when they were first constructed.
Well, I know, because I'm a Dutch police officer, I know that in the Netherlands there was a renew some years ago that the railways have a direct line with our national coordinator counterterrorism. So it can be done, but it depends on the country themselves, actually.
Right, so in that sense, you could have inconsistent standards.
Yes.
Okay, then. The gentleman there, please. And again, if you could give us your name and the organisation or publication you represent.
Thank you, Juliet. My name is Francesco Dionori. I am from the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe, co-organizer of the workshop we had yesterday specifically on rail security here. And of course, thank you to UIC and ITF for arranging that with us. I have a question, but first of all, I think what Mr. Nelbeck said in his intervention previously on coordination and cooperation, that's something that clearly came out of our discussions yesterday as very important going forward, and potentially there's a gap there in being able to cross-border cooperate, to understand how it's working and how it can be improved as well. But my question is specifically for John. You raised an issue on who runs policing on the railways. From what I understood, you were sort of hinting that maybe it was better that there were railway police separated, but maybe I've misinterpreted how you explain that. It came across that the move towards general police of the railways is not really having the effects in terms of railway crime as before. Is that a correct statement? And if so, do you have any data that can support that in terms of change in crime or security-related issues? Thank you.
Thank you. John.
No, I don't have data. It's a gut feeling, but it's also what I heard from our members. But also because we are a permanent guest at Koopelver, so we have a lot of contacts through Koopelver with the private operators, and it's also what we hear. When I look to the police, and especially to the old railway police who are becoming a part now of national police or federal police, I also hear the same thing. So I don't have exact data, so it's more what I heard in the outside world and our gut feeling. I was within the railway police for more than 30 years, and then we changed from railway police of the Dutch railways to national police. So I know the difference, and you have to have, we call it a yellow heart in a blue uniform, because our trains are yellow. And now you see it's only blue hearts.
Okay, would you like to pick up on that, or is that it? Okay, I think you've answered the question. Are there questions from anybody else? Gentleman over here, please. Can we just bring the microphone to him? I think it's Captain Salah. Is Etihad Airways. Sorry, you introduce yourself.
Good afternoon. My name is Salah Farajallah from Etihad Airways, Abu Dhabi, United Arab Emirates. And my question is, what are the active and proactive measures to protect public using trains? Day before yesterday, I came on board from the train from Frankfurt. I had a suitcase, big suitcase, and nobody knows what is in it. And I saw in some countries only, I saw in Spain they use X-ray machines and so on. So what are we about that measures? Because rails are subject to, loading a lot of things, baggage and things that can be probably hazardous if not screened.
Right. Thank you very much. That's the active and proactive measures for the public using the trains. Everybody's nodding their heads sagely there. Who'd like to take the plunge? Who'd like to go first, or shall I nominate? Kia's going to take the plunge.
In fact, you noticed we do not change luggage without reason. And at our opinion, in fact, it is in a normal situation not necessary to do that. That shows the figures we have. And I can tell you concerning terrorist attacks in Germany, concerning railways, since the beginning of this century, we had 4 incidents, 4. And 2 of them failed. There were people with bombs in a suitcase in 2006. In a regional train, the bomb didn't explode. And we had one incident in 2012 at a railway station in Bonn, main station. There was a bomb in a bag, did not explode. And we had an attack with a knife 2 years ago, or 4 years ago, at the main station in Hanover, where a young girl, I think 14 years old, reclaimed ISIS, and she attacked a police officer of the federal police with a knife. And we had one attack with an axe 2 years ago by a young boy, the same background, at a tourist family in a regional train. These were the incidents. Should we now, in this situation, check any suitcase of, I think in Germany, nearly 3 billion of passengers, which would make the normal railway traffic impossible. We cannot work in aviation style. So we know this risk, the police knows this risk, and we have provided a lot of awareness of our staff and of course of the police, and we look at the people, video systems included, and if somebody is suspicious, we have the right and the opportunities to check the suitcase. And if the situation changes and the police says we have information that there could be something happen in Frankfurt airport or Frankfurt main station, then we are able to check all the luggage and the passengers, and the train, of course, will not run in time. This is the situation we live in, and we are fighting for not changing this situation if the situation doesn't change. So this is a risk we know, but I think it's bearable.
Okay, John.
Yeah, I like to add something to that. After the Thalys attack in the train between Amsterdam and Paris in Belgium, the French took some measures with all arriving trains on Thalys. So everybody who's getting out was checked. And in this case, you created this enormous soft target because the trains were not checked at the starting point in Amsterdam, not at the airport at Schiphol, not in Antwerp, not in Brussels, but it was checked in arriving. So useless in my opinion. What they do now, they skip that and now they check everyone who wants to go on board. Well, I travel a lot to Paris with the Thalys. What you see now, about 500 to 600 people are standing in the main hall, waiting to be checked. So you create a huge new soft target. And for what? I think I agree with what Mr. Neubeck said. Don't put our head in the sand because the terrorist threat is always there. But don't lose our system. We have the open system of traveling by train. So I think it's the right thing that what operators are doing.
Sure. And I can see Norio nodding his head in agreement there. And a question specifically for you, Norio, because look, because of the nature of rail travel, there will always be challenges, there will always be dangers. So from your point of view, from that of Panasonic, I mean, what is the way forward in the future, the technology, which direction will it take us, bearing in mind that it has to balance security needs with practicalities?
I believe face recognition system is very important to
Facial
prevent.
recognition systems.
Yeah, so as long as suspected person's picture is captured in advance, we can detect such person from the system. So I think we can prevent most of this kind of situation.
Okay, so we're likely to see more of that proliferating in the railway networks.
Yes, but to be honest, accuracy is still not 100%. And especially some situation like under direct sunshine, it's still difficult. So we are keep developing, improving our system to improve accuracy. Yeah, so that this can support to prevent terror attack.
Okay, we've got time for one more brief question. Would anyone like to ask a question? Hi. Would you like to introduce yourself? From freight to passengers.
Thank you. Sorry. Jose Sosaya. And first of all, one comment for Gert. I do agree with you that railroads, that we run in open spaces, thousands of kilometers of open spaces, and we are the most safe and secure way of transportation. At least I have no doubt on that, and we work every day for that to continue happening, being the same way. A big effort and big investment. And just one comment on that, and I do agree on that. And to John, I would like to ask you, on social anti-behavior, is that what you call it? Like in Mexico, we have these problems with political problems. People going and block the track. They stop on the track, they won't move. The police won't do nothing because they say it's human rights and they have the right to manifestate any opposition or whatever they want. So how you handle that here, or how you proceed on that?
In most European countries, when you want to demonstrate, you have to ask permission. And in that permission, there's always described that you can do that. You have to go over there, you can do that. So when people are demonstrating and they don't get up to what in the description is written, police will always interfere. Also because the economic impact, especially on railways. When you block a train, in Europe, our train running almost every 10 or 15 minutes, so it's very, very crowded on the tracks. So when one train is stopped, it has an immediate impact on all of the trains. So from police point of view, we don't allow that. But you are right, there's always the human rights. So it's always a balance between what is right and what is not right. But basically, when it's not written, and it's not written that you can sit on track, so we get them out.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and we have to end it there because it is now 2 o'clock. So thank you to our panellists, or our guests, in fact, from the first panel, and indeed to you, gentlemen, for your insight into a very challenging subject. And I have to stress again that, yes, there are dangers, but railway is certainly the safest way to travel. So thank you once again to our guests. Norio Hasuishi from Panasonic Corporation, thank you so much. John Lyon, the Secretary General of Railpol, and of course Professor Gerd Neubeck, Head of Security at Deutsche Bahn. Thank you so much for your time and enjoy the rest of the afternoon. Thank you.